Our next presenter is Bob Bauer. Bob, and we're going to just about the other side of the world for this presentation. Bob will be presenting on integrated water management utilising the tools of ISMAR, developing a catchment scale groundwater replenishment system for the Hekiao Hinds Plains in Canterbury, New Zealand. Thank you, Bob.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Kia ora, hola. I'll start a timer on myself. Yet again, I'm too many slides in a few minutes, so I'll keep an eye on myself here. Listen, really honored to be here. It is actually the antipodes of Christchurch, New Zealand is northern Spain, so I've traveled a long way here today with one of my colleagues, Claire Holbrook, and also Russell and Peter as well. Today, how do we do this? Just the green? Yep. So today I want to talk to you about this project. Sorry about the long title, so I kind of shortened it down for this. And I guess it's the one time every 3 years we get to share a little bit. I'm a hydrologist. I got dragged underground about 20 years ago, actually working in the Pacific Northwest on the Walla Walla Basin. I started the Managed Aquifer Recharge Scheme there. And I guess my whole career, because I came from surface hydrology, I've been very interested in base flows and healthy aquifer systems as they provide flows to rivers and quality. So there was a question earlier about losses. I think true integrated conjunctive management now there is no losses. It's groundwater returns, groundwater going in. And I think most of the systems that we're developing in New Zealand are kind of in that kind of frame of work, a sort of tragedy of the commons, managing groundwater systems more sustainably for the future and identifying all the benefits. And that's what I'll share with you today. It's one of two bookends. Claire Holbrook's going to focus on the technical side of things, so very classical methods, results, and of our testing program, particularly for the Hinds. And I'm going to focus more on how we look at catchment scale schemes in New Zealand and how we're trying to approach these big world or even catchment or regional problems. Just to share a few more things that we've been working on, other projects around. There is 2 islands to New Zealand, as you know, or hopefully you know that. And we're working on national guidelines. You notice that all the projects, including the one I'm talking to you today on, is on the eastern side, which tends to be the drier parts of New Zealand. So lots of different programs there. Again, I believe I've gave credit to my other colleagues that have contributed. So whereas New Zealand, straight through the planet down here, and there is the Hinds project on the IGRAC site for Managed Aquifer Recharge programs. No, so I'll start with, listen, this is the perfect audience, my brothers and sisters that work in this area, but the way we've approached it with communities is to talk about MAR not as an end goal unto itself, but a set of tools, because in effect, things like ASR can almost take a life of their own because they become my water in the ground, my water out. And if you approach it at the catchment scale, those tools aren't the end goal. The tools are just a set of tools, infiltration basins, ASR bores, and things like that. But the end goals are catchment scale replenishment systems that manage groundwater as a common benefit to the whole community as one system. So that's the kind of approach that we've done, and in particular Hinds. And as you would know, in New Zealand, like most places, we've struggled with, we're going to build big dams to store our water. Well, that's a very emotive topic now, and a lot of people don't want to see big dams on rivers anymore. So what the alternative now has been to look at groundwater systems as the focal point of that stored water, and to do very similar distribution systems, delivering and capturing that water during the winter or shoulder seasons off irrigation, delivering that water out to key recharge sites, recharging and then recovering that water at the right times of year. By managing that groundwater system holistically, we manage both the quality and quantity, and we pay attention to things like the return flows to rivers and groundwater-dependent ecosystems. The Hinds catchment, don't really have a pointer, but basically is on the Canterbury Plains. Really New Zealand's #1 export is agriculture, and in particularly recently it's dairy export, so milk powder. It's transformed quite a bit, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the Hinds Plains and mid-Canterbury region is probably the epicenter of the economy in New Zealand. It's the #1 place for agriculture. It's also the #1 place for over-allocation of groundwater, loss of surface flows, and dramatic changes in water quality as well. So it's sort of ground zero in New Zealand for changes in water management. The layout of the catchment is, so on the bottom part of the screen is the Rangitata River. It's an alpine-fed river. You've seen the beautiful pictures of New Zealand mountains. It's fed from that. Then on the northern side is the Ashburton, another alpine-fed river. These are the plains that meet the Pacific Ocean on the right-hand side. In the 1940s, during post-World War II, there was a large canal that was put across the top of the catchment. And then for quite a few, over 50 years, that water was diverted and put out through border dike or flood irrigation systems. And so for this community, one of the key things about MAR is we call it something new, but actually for 50 years they did accidental MAR. And then these same farmers got told, hey, actually, we want you to become more efficient. We want to pump more water out of the ground. So for the community, they had a huge history of MAR, or unmanaged aquifer recharge, and subsequently through the things they were told to do, like be more efficient, they started to lose the groundwater storage and it had impacts. The two green areas are large irrigation, formerly border dike, now spray, that's used for dairying sheep and beef and deer and arable crops. And then obviously the arrows are the different flow-through paths. The groundwater system is an unconfined system. It's about 75 billion cubic meters of water, 650 meters thick by 30 or 40 kilometers. And the key output here is not only the groundwater reservoir, but there's a series of 38 spring-fed streams where there's groundwater-dependent ecosystems that had, under the unmanaged aquifer recharge, done quite well, and now are dry, and we've lost habitat and things like that. So I won't go into this in detail, but the one key thing, let me just get up here to the, so I was going to walk you through the history, but I think I've a little too many slides. So the key thing is that we walk through time, we make these changes to catchment scale issues, and those have an impact on the groundwater system. So as I mentioned, this community had already had a massive MAR scheme, it just wasn't called MAR. Subsequently, in about the 1990s, which surprised me, moving from the United States to New Zealand, that's when they started to develop the groundwater resource, which changed quite rapidly, and subsequently went to a lot of dairying as well. And how I've shared that in the past, and I use this with community groups as well, is to talk about groundwater, because groundwater is a black box for a lot of people. But it, you know, if a system's in balance and we're sort of at that natural yield, the rainfall and the river losses are balanced out by the discharges and the flows out through the groundwater system, evapotranspiration. And in this case, the history of this catchment was that they did a lot of MAR by accident, so they actually raised the water levels, the springs did better. Then consequently, they both were told to get more efficient, spray from border to spray, and also they allocated and over-allocated the groundwater systems. And so very simply for the community, MAR is a way to bring back not only the quantity but the quality, because of the dairying, a lot of the water entering the aquifer is the only water entering the aquifer now is quite high concentration in nutrients. What's the data that suggests that? So there's the period, and I use it's not a statistical median, but basically a line to train your eyes, that for the community, the history was in the 1970s through 1995, that ups and downs, dry and wet years, as we expect with climate change, of course, but in general, that system was in more stable condition. Then the loss of border dike and the overpumping shows that, yes, we have the highs and lows, but we're moving towards a system where bores are going dry, and that had a direct impact on the springs. Subsequently, quality, similarly, international, that's nitrate concentrations in the shallow parts of the groundwater system, the springs that flow through them, and even the deeper groundwater system where we're drawing those nutrients from the dairying down deeper has become a problem. So the community identified that. This just shows, Claire will be talking about the science program, and I'm going to focus on the community process and the actual cost-benefit analysis and the scheme designs. And I apologize, any one of these could be a single presentation, but I wanted to give you a sense of the bigger picture and how to develop sort of this, how we're doing these catchment, community-based catchment approaches. So when the community saw all these problems in their system, amongst a whole bunch of other things like riparian fencing and all that kind of standard stuff that goes with watershed restoration, they identified some big ticket items with groundwater in particular. And what they did outside of MAR was to no more groundwater usage out of the system. They had to cap it. You can't keep taking it out and trying to put it back in. You can't keep up. They were reviewing, and luckily in New Zealand we do have a national metering rule, so people are forced to the actual paper consents or rights versus the actual usage. And then they did allow surface people that had lost their rights to move to groundwater, which was a bit of an equity thing. On the nitrogen and the nutrient side, it's not just try to pour water in the ground and dilute the problem. There's significant requirements by the farming systems and the farmers there. And they did set a goal in the aquifer of about 6.9 milligrams per liter. And as you can see, we're up around 12 now, so, and then farm plans. But what was consistent for the community was we know that border dike irrigation or accidental MAR works, but can we use it as a catchment scale to address these bigger issues? So a trial program was developed. And so the trial program, which Claire will talk about on Wednesday, I believe, you know, for the community, there's some key points they were looking for, some basic science, and when they saw that, they were like, yep, we know we can do this, we've done it in the past. And they established the goals, these 4 main goals for the overall development of a MAR or groundwater replenishment scheme. Improve the sustainability of the groundwater storage system, improve the flows, enhance quality, and target and protect drinking water supplies. So the last part of the presentation is focused on the scheme design. So we have costed and done a business case for the community based on the testing program. And basically, there's a whole series of site selection processes. One of the key points for the Hines catchment is that it does have the infrastructure already there. There's a lot of farm ponds on your bottom left next to our first MAR site. There's community drinking water supplies. We also did some pretty cool geostatistical modeling of the permeability, particularly as it relates to picking locations for MAR sites where we're less likely to get clay and mounding issues and things like that. So we did, a lot of the work fed into that. And what we ended up with is, what we did is a wholesale look at all the potential MAR sites, given those criteria of which one was, is there land available, public land that we could use? And you can see the quite giant map on the right with lots of dots. There's about 173 potential locations that we had determined. And then we used these kind of 6 techniques, basically all different types of surface infiltration techniques. And in particular, there was a lot of places where we need MAR in a location, but we'd have clay-bound geology and things. So we needed to come up with dry wells or what we're calling soakage systems to deliver that water. The community set some goals. You never know how much is enough. But the community has set a goal of 125 million cubic meters a year. That's probably about 60% of what they used to do accidentally with border dike. But given, you know, the journey of where we're starting from now and where we want to try to get to by 2035, that was a good interim goal. But given that we're trying to collect water in the off-season, the winter and the shoulder seasons, we actually have to build over capacity of the MAR system. So when I was found all the sites I could possibly find, and then we pared that down in an economic model to achieve the goals given the time of year and the amount of water going into the system. So that's sort of how we did the overall. Now, one of the key things about selling any MAR program or getting it back out to the community and obviously trying to get money out of it or getting money for the scheme is to identify the beneficiaries. And thanks to Peter and Russ weighed in a lot on this and a lot of the economic papers that have been done by others around the world. We really tried to go to the community and talk about the benefits of a healthy managed groundwater system. Obviously drinking water and protection of drinking water supplies. The groundwater plays a huge role in that. Protecting those stream flows. The quality of groundwater not only for use for irrigation but also flows back to those streams. Usage and the potential as a storage or a supplementary storage, particularly as climate change starts to bite harder and harder in New Zealand. So you can see that we don't just make it about irrigators or water problems, it's about a community-based thing, and then when we go to try to get the program funded, which likely will be through a tax or rating system, that's all pretty straightforward, or at least people see the need for a sustainable groundwater system. Cost-benefit analysis, I'll just go through a few key points from it. We did extensive on-farm economic modeling that drove this. We also costed different scenarios. What's the cost of providing reticulated supply to everyone versus not, that kind of thing. And the key bits for this, for the overall, was a 21-year program, about $19.6 million in monitoring CapEx, OpEx costs, $3.5 billion, about $7 per hectare. Let's see. Now, the key thing for us is the water that's available in the winter competes with power generation. So there's an opportunity cost. It could be free, depending on consents or rights, but it also could be as high as 14 cents a meter. Given that's still in negotiations, we use the worst case, which was a range of 0 to 14. And you can see that my costs go then from 19.6 to 192 million, excuse me. That said, it is an economy. The overall net benefits, net NPV values are 2.3 to 2.5. So finishing up, last slide. The next steps in the program, they just formed a community trust, and the key there is get all the right people to the table, the people that care about the environment, the ecosystems, the cultural interests, the water users, the community, the water supplies. Secure that source water program, water for the program. Obviously, continue to develop and adapt the tools. It's really critical that a ISMAR tool by itself, as you all know probably in this audience, isn't just going to work the first time through the way you want it to, and you start to have to adapt to the hydrogeology and the water conditions, particularly around water quality and things like that. We have lots of numerical modeling already done, but we'll still need to be doing some of that to understand the spatial and temporal kind of placement of sites. And yeah, we're finally kind of in the last couple of years of this program, so that's it.
Very good, Bob. Thank you very much. We have time for one question. Over there.
Yeah, Bob, just a quick hi. Just a quick question about your benefits. You mentioned, no, I may have gotten this wrong, but you mentioned hydropower. So did you mean that that's a kind of benefit, an opportunity cost from an alternative use of the water? Or, I would have thought that the benefits of your scheme are much wider, sort of, as you described them. So do you think you could clarify this?
Sure, yeah. So the cost, the only major cost right now isn't obviously in that kind of scale of $2 or $3 billion in income, isn't the scheme itself. It's that as the irrigators got more efficient over the years, they kind of let go of the water they weren't using, and it went to the the power company. The problem is that wasn't really smart, because now they need it back, and so there's a lot of toing and froing on wait, that was our water and stuff like that. So we had to cost it. So power generation during the winter, which in New Zealand is the primary time for power for homes and things like that. So it's not well, obviously power is a benefit, but it's competing with that source water we need. That said, there's a lot of consents, and it seems like as we peel the onion, we're finding water in little hidey holes and different consents. So we're kind of hobbling it together, but those negotiations, are still ongoing. Hope that answered it.
Thank you, Bob, for a great presentation and an excellent example of ISMAR embedded within broader integrated water resource management objectives.
Thank you.
Very nicely done.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Paul.